Okay, I am going to show you how to do your initial plan for your neighborhood. What I've done is, you're going to do yours hand drawing. So I've tried to emulate on my drawing board in Photoshop a piece of trace that's placed over, my 11 by 17 sheet of paper for my neighborhood. Now, a couple things I want you to think, I want to kind of point out to you. The first is that um, it's very natural to want to get into the details of things, and I've, reviewed some of your work with a couple of you, and a lot of you have started to get into the detail. For this, I want you to step back from that because, and it's very tempting. I do it all the time too. I want to get in the details, but really, what you need to do is you need to kind of go to that 30,000-foot planning sort of view, and you need to kind of put your big ideas down on paper and then get into the detail. If you have ideas for detail and stuff like that, that's great. Just go ahead and sketch something up in your sketchbook and keep notes in your sketchbook and sketch your ideas and write text of notes and put your ideas in there. One of you had a really great idea for a crosswalk design to connect two places of a park. Go ahead and do that. But for this, what I want you to do is I want you to be thinking very high level thoughts, and I want you to draw those kind of like in a lynch map type of style. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to take this circle north sort of neighborhood that I did that plan for, and I've gone over a lot of the analysis that I did for this neighborhood with you guys. So I have that analysis in my head now, and I'm starting to think about, all right, what do I want to do in the neighborhood, right? And how do I express that? So I'm going to just draw things on here as if I was, drawing on paper. I'm going to try to emulate that for you guys. So I know, for example, one of the things I want to do is, I have this really great green space that's an asset to this neighborhood, and so I want to kind of just like draw that in so that I'm just kind of highlighting, what's existing. Again, I'm going to try and draw this. I'm going to use some a little bit bigger. So I'm drawing this in as if I'm drawing by hand on a sheet of paper. I'm just kind of highlighting the fact that I've got this great park space, and I'm thinking, this is such a great amenity, but when I was in the neighborhood and when I was looking, nobody really uses it. And there's this big street, East Boulevard, that is right here, that's really kind of wide, and it kind of really creates a separation that's not very friendly to cross. So there's like this barrier that street is because of its design. Now, I'm not going to get into the level of the design of the street yet, but I'm just knowing that that's an issue, and that there's here is this like existing park space. And so I'm going to also I'm going to put in notes in there. So just write in your notes. I'm going to go existing park, right? I'm going to write that note in there, and I'm going to remember that there's like all this kind of land right here that is kind of park space but is not really super well connected to the green space. I have this parking lot right here in front of the old folks home that just kind of seems like a waste. I've got this vacant piece of land down here on Ashbury and 105th that used to be a gas station that's vacant, and these two parcels here are vacant. So I'm going to start thinking about how do I create these connections into the park in a more, I'm thinking very big picture, right? So I might choose like a lighter green to differentiate between my existing park and then the connections I want to make. And so I'm going to draw those in. I'm going to, draw in like, oh, I'm going to create these like green fingers, if you will, that kind of connect into the neighborhood. So there are going to be these green fingers that kind of connect. I'm going to draw those in. And even down by the VA, there's all this space here that's kind of empty, right? Or it's right here. So I'm going to kind of draw this in too as like a potential connection. And then what I'm going to do is I'm going to note that as well. I'm going to put like new linear. And in the plan we actually called them like green fingers, but I'll just call them new linear park in here. Right, so I'm going to put that there, and then I'm going to write that again down where I have my other. And then what I'm going to do, whoops. Oh, I saw that. So then what I'm going to do is I'm going to, oh, sorry, I don't know why this is not doing what I want it to do. Try that again. Okay, I'm going to move this here. I'm pretend I'm handwriting these in. Sorry, you guys, I'm having trouble with my drawing board. I just brought it home from work and it's acting weird. So I'm going to pretend I wrote those in. And then I'm going to, I'm going to actually draw some arrows because I want to really reinforce this idea that, this connection is being made. And, a line with an arrow on both sides really kind of shows that. So I'm just going to make sure I kind of draw in these arrows that show these connections I'm making. Okay, so I've kind of dealt with this park thing. I know that this is the library right here, and I kind of want to put an so I had this idea like, oh, this neighborhood is close to University Circle. There's a lot of museums in University Circle. A lot of civil rights activity kind of happened in this neighborhood. Martin Luther King spoke here many, many times. So did Malcolm X. And so I want to kind of highlight these ideas I have for like these cultural institutions. So I'm going to kind of put a circle here. I'm going to draw in a circle, and I'm going to put in my cultural institutions that I think that I want to have in this neighborhood that are kind of like my big ideas. Because I want to draw people into the neighborhood, and I want to leverage the fact that it's right next to the largest cultural district in our state, probably. So if people are going to come to go to the art museum or the natural history museum or whatever it is, right? Why wouldn't they just go like a couple blocks away if they found out, oh, there's this really great, civil rights museum there, right? So I'm gonna put these in, and I'm gonna notate that. I'm gonna put center for, or I don't know, I'll just call it Civil Rights Museum, right? I'm going to note that up. So that's one amenity space. And then I'm going to take, I know that I wanted to create also a, I wanted to create a nature center that, like, the Rockefeller Park doesn't really have a nature center. So there's an old house right here that I can use. And in addition to that old house has like soil from every place in the world that has a park in here. So actually I'm going to call it, and that's not going to be the nature center. That's going to be the cultural gardens museum. Again, this whole idea, there's museums right down the street. We can create additional museums, and the library downtown has all these maps of these cultural gardens, and it has like the plans and the drawings for them and photographs of the history. So I want to put all that in one place. And then I had an idea for an additional connection in the park. There's a bike path that kind of goes through the park. So I want to add some additional biking infrastructure because I want to connect, the park to the neighborhood, and I want to encourage bicycling for neighborhood residents in the park. But additionally, this bike path that kind of goes through the neighborhood, and I need a thicker line for that. It's called the Lake to Lakes Trail. I did some research. I found out it's called the Lake to Lakes Trail, and it goes to Lake Erie all the way to the Shaker Lakes. So I know that it follows this path, and it's like this existing bike path, and I want to somehow connect to that, right? So, maybe I'm going to do like a little bicycle sort of icon. Not that that's a great bicycle icon, but I'm just kind of like, okay, I'm doing like a bicycle. It has to be. Maybe I should have done it like this, but whatever. But I know that there's this path that was abandoned that kind of leads up to, from down here, it leads up into the neighborhood. So I'm going to make that a connection, and it goes kind of right to where my civil rights museum is, so, which is even cooler. So I'm going to say that that's like, this recreational biking path, so that these people that are riding from Shaker Lakes down to Lake Erie, they can get off the path here, and there might be a sign down here that, might be a sign right here that kind of says, oh, go up, or Civil Rights Museum up this way, and you go up that path, and boom. And then this also creates a way for people in the neighborhood to kind of go back down into the park. So I'm going to do that. So I've started, creating these cultural institutions. I've kind of put them on there with circles, created these new linear parks to kind of really let the green space flow into the neighborhood and create these gateways into the park. And then I'm looking at my street, and I know that this street is so empty, so I need to start rebuilding this street and thinking about what kind of actual physical infrastructure is going to be on this street. And I know I need I need to propose some buildings, right? So I'm going to just draw in some places where I know I need density. So I need like, this is kind of empty, and I'm going to like propose that there be some kind of building there. I'm going to propose that these are going to be like mixed use buildings, right? I want some nice mixed use buildings in these corners. I might draw the footprints where I want mixed use buildings. I might draw, kind of more of a bubble diagram and just say like density or whatever. And then I know this is like a gas station thing or a cell phone like pull up thing. It's awful. So I know I want to like propose that these spaces that are kind of empty are going to be kind of dense mixed use buildings, right? So I'm just going to draw that in, and maybe I put in like mixed use infill, and maybe I want to even say like that I want it to be 3 to 5 stories. And again, I'm trying to think like it's mostly single family houses in this neighborhood. I'm trying to create a mixed income sort of condition, right? Because mixed income is really going to make my neighborhood stronger. I'm getting rid of like potential weaknesses. If you think of a lot of the neighborhoods in our city, they built all these single family houses, and the city was growing, and mostly there were these young families that were big families. So they moved in, right? And then the couple raised their kids in that house. And then there was like everyone had 5 kids, 8 kids, whatever. There wasn't anywhere for them to live in the neighborhood if there wasn't a lot of other options or new housing or apartment buildings. This neighborhood has some apartment buildings along the park right here. But so then what they do, they move to the suburbs. And if you think of a lot of neighborhoods that were single use like that, everybody stays in their house. They get old, they can't take care of their house, and there's not a lot of turnover. So you need that old person to be like, okay, I can't take care of this house anymore, but there's somewhere else in my neighborhood that I can go live that's an apartment building for old folks, and I can still stay in my neighborhood. And then a new young family can buy my house, and they can raise their family in my house, right? So you're starting to think about all of these conditions. So I've got this mixed use infill, and I know that I want to create some additional streets because I got these big blocks. And from the study I did, I found some land that had vacant land for some of these parcels. So I really want to start thinking about my street connections and just drawing those in. Like, where am I going to have these street connections? Well, I know that I'm going to break the block like right here. I'm going to make that connection from this one street to the other street. I know that I can continue this on through here, right? So I'm going to make that connection like that. I know that I want to create an alley street behind my retail shopping, so I'm providing parking back there and a different way to circulate through the neighborhood. And I know I want to also, I want to connect this, I want to take this alley and connect it out through here. And maybe there was an alley there, I don't remember, but you know, I want to make that connection. Oops. So I want to highlight this connection here, you know, that I'm trying to create this connection through the center in this alley street all the way through the block. So really, I'm making a lot of these north-south connections, which makes sense because we really live in an east-west oriented city. Right, so I've made those, and I know, so these are going to be for cars and people walking, but I know that I had some connections that were just like a pedestrian connection, so I'm going to make my pedestrian connection through here. And then I'm just going to note it up, right? I'm going to be like, break the block, right? Because I've got these unwalkable blocks. Or maybe I'm just going to call it a block break. Right? And I'm going to just note all my block breaks. Mamma mia. Take my layers out here because that's not working. There we go. So I've got my block breaks there. And then maybe I'm just going to note this as a pedestrian connection. Right? I'll note that as my ped connection. And then I do know that I also wanted to kind of suggest infill housing. So maybe I'm going to, I had kind of purple for buildings. Maybe I'll just do like a lighter purple. And I'm just going to kind of do some bubble diagramming. So I'm going to create a new layer. I'm just going to kind of do like a bubble diagram that just kind of gets in this whole area that's like single family housing. And oops, know that there's like a school. Actually, I'm gonna stick within the circle. But there were a lot of parcels that were kind of like abandoned, or houses that were abandoned. And maybe what I'm gonna do for these two, maybe I just do like I'm gonna do some infill or color that in, but light, just so it starts to differentiate it from the rest of, oops. Okay, and then, oops. So, you know, I'll just title that single family infill. So, you know, if I was sketching now, I pull my paper away from my, you know, and with these block breaks, maybe what I want to do real light is kind of indicate the block so I know what the heck's going on here. So maybe, you know, I'll just draw in really light, like the block breaks that I want to create here. So I know that I'm taking this block that's existing and I'm really starting to create something different and make more of a walkable neighborhood where I actually have blocks that work for people and not just cars. Oops. Right? So, and then I might note up some historic buildings that I want to, redo, because this right here is like an old school. It's not necessarily super historic. It's from like the mid 20th century, but I might note like adaptive reuse. Right? And make some other additional notes, but so it doesn't have to be super whatever, but it's just like a simple graphic diagram that shows your big thinking and what you're trying to do. And then you can, like this was my first swig at it. I might put another piece of paper down over this and I might, clean it up a little and clarify it so it looks like a really good kind of plan, just your first blush at a plan that is very diagrammatic. So this is a diagrammatic plan. And diagrammatic plans are really important for planning and design work, especially when you're starting. Even architects, when they're designing buildings, they start out with something like this and they have a program, right? And that program might be they need 10,000 square feet of retail. They might need, 82 units minimum of apartments, living units like apartments, units, and they might need them in certain percentages, right? Like 10% in studios, 25% two bedrooms, 70% one bedrooms, and then they'll bubble diagram out the building and start putting the uses next to each other, the retail, the fitness center that's in the apartment building, where, check-in is, where mail delivery is, and they'll bubble diagram it out and start planning. It's like space planning. So this is space planning on a neighborhood scale. I'm thinking about my different spaces, my different uses, the connections that I'm making, what should be next to each other. It's just a little bit different than designing a new building because you have an existing neighborhood framework that you're working within. So I hope this helps you put together your initial plan for your neighborhood, your diagrammatic plan, and just draw it up, take a picture of it, and I'm going to create a place for you to put it on Blackboard to turn it in so we could just look at them tomorrow, okay? If you have questions, text me or whatever.